All right. Hello, Cardo. Nice to see you. We're back at it again. Woohoo! So, the plan was to actually do one of these at the exhibits when we were at ITG, and I think you guys might have seen what that ended up looking like. And it wasn't bad, but I couldn't do a genuine live stream. Not live stream, a Q and A. So I decided, yeah, when we get back, we better do another one of these because that one didn't count. All right. So yeah. So let me give you a quick rundown of what happened in ITG. So we got there because we had a booth, right? That meant we had to be there on Tuesday to set up. And it didn't take us, I think we got there about noon or somewhere, like maybe at 1 o'clock or something like that. It didn't take us but a couple hours to get set up. Part of that is due to the resourcefulness of my wife, who had all that stuff planned out. Even though it was our first time, she had all that stuff planned out. Things were packed the way they needed to be packed. That way, when we got there, bam, right there, it was ready to go. And one of the cool things that happened while we were there, and it happened more than once, it was, I think, 3 or 4 times that this happened, there would be a Texas high school band director with his trumpet players there, and they would see me and recognize me and want to take a picture, right? Because I wrote the etudes each year for the auditions for the jazz etudes. And what was funny is they're excited to see me, and I'm excited to see them, and because I'm always excited to meet up with people who are using my stuff. And when it comes to those etudes, the whole state of Texas is using that stuff, right? And they would want to get a group picture, and it was funny because I'll look, and the other people in the like the foyer or wherever it is that this is happening, they're looking to, like, trying to see my name badge to see who I am. And that's the funny part, right? I have this idea of success, right? A lot of people don't see it this way. I would love to be successful in a way that nobody knows who I am. And I'm getting, there's some things that I've done in my career that have really done well in that direction, where it's the product that has been successful, not me. I hope that makes sense. So when there's success like that, so yes, in the eyes of those students who practiced my music all the time, they might think that, I'm not saying that they think I'm famous or anything like that, but they see it as a special moment because the guy that wrote the music they're playing is there. But that doesn't make me any more elevated than just the guy that's, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But it was cool. It was an honor to meet up with those people. The same thing was true also. There were so many people that came up to me and said, hey, I use your books, right? There was one guy that were riding in the elevator, and on the way up the elevator, he looks at me and says, oh, it's you. And tells me this long story about how my books have turned his playing around. And this kind of thing happened the whole time. The last time that it happened was on Friday night. And this guy sat next to me, and we on the first night he sat next to me. Then on Friday night he sat next to me again. He says, "I figured out who you are," he says. And he opened up his phone and he showed me that he's been listening to my music. He made the connection that he's been listening to my music. Now, why would he not recognize me? Because he wasn't listening to me. And that's the point that I've been trying to make, is that think about it. When you look at the way the music business works, it's the celebrity of the artist that usually carries the product. And that's why people are so quick to if you're selling soap, you want that celebrity to say, "Oh, I use his soap," right? Because that's what sells, is that celebrity. You're selling that person. You're not selling that person's product. I want it to be the other way around. I want them to love my product, not me. I would rather people never know about me. I hope that makes sense. And so anyway, this guy made the connection. He's sitting next to me and he's grinning and he says, "Look," and he opens up the phone and he's showing me which of the albums that he listens to, that of my albums. He told me that those albums are what inspired him to do the stuff that he's doing. And to me, that's really what all this stuff is about, in my opinion. Anyway, so Cardo has a question. Cardo says, "How do you know when it's time to finish practicing for the day and pack away the trumpet?" Well, if you're following my system, and I'm not sure that you are, but I'm gonna answer your question two different ways so that other people can benefit as well. If you're following my system, then some of that is going to be pre-planned. So if you're on a medium day, then there's time limits on how much you should practice that day. If you're on especially if you're on a reduced day, right? If you're, so my schedule is medium, difficult, easy. Medium, difficult, easy, and then 1 day off. 2 3-day rotations and a day off. And the only day that the end is not clear is that second day, when you're going to push yourself to fatigue. When you stop there is the only day of the week that it's not clear. If you're pushing yourself to fatigue on that day in my system, then the time to stop is when you might be causing damage to your chops. You don't stop just because it doesn't sound good. You don't stop because it's uncomfortable. The only reason you should stop on that day in my system is if you think you might be causing damage. Now, here's the thing. If you follow the 3 levels of rest, you don't have to stop at all because you're not going to damage anything. You can't. 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, like that. And then also, every time you play something, you take the horn off your lips for the exact same amount of time. So if you play something 8 measures long, then you're going to rest for 8 measures. If you play something for 10 beats, you're going to rest for 10 beats. If you combine those 2 types of rest throughout the day, you won't reach that point of fatigue that you're going to damage yourself. So the answer to that question then, in that context, is you don't have to stop at all. You can go and go and go. You know, I don't do this as much as I used to, but like, so let's say 10, 15 years ago, it was not uncommon for me to get up early on Tuesday, do my hour routine, have breakfast, do a half-hour routine, get some chores done, do a 15-minute routine, and the rest of the day was 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off, 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. I would do that until 11, 12, 1 in the morning. Long, long, long day of practice. Now, of course, you can't do that if you've got other commitments. But there were times when I was able to pull that off and practice many, many hours on that Tuesday. A lot of people say, well, I can't practice the way you practice because I need more time. Well, you can get that time on this Tuesday. Your hypothetical Tuesday. It doesn't have to be Tuesday. I call it a hypothetical Tuesday. If you're following my system, you know what I'm talking about. Now, what if you don't follow my system and you kind of sort of practice the same every day? Then I will still say this, that you should be resting. And if you are resting, and I mean resting both ways, right? However long your session is, that's how long you should rest before you touch the horn again. But also within the session, everything you play, you got to rest as long as you played. And by the way I can guarantee that is by singing and fingering. I play it, then I pull the horn off my face and sing and finger it, and then play it, and then sing and finger it, play it, sing and finger it. If you practice like that, there's very little that could make you have to stop. I hope that answers your question. If you don't do the resting, see, I don't even know how to answer that. I said I would answer both ways, but the more I get into this, the more I realize I don't know how to practice that other way anymore. If you're not resting, how do you know where that line is? How do you know where the line of damage is? How do you know when you've gone too far? Isn't it better to practice in a way that you can't possibly go too far because you rested enough? Now, of course, there is one exception to this resting thing that I'm talking about. You can get that level of fatigue if you are playing loud and high and loud. If you're playing high and loud, it can push your fatigue enough that maybe you need to stop and get some rest. But yeah, it's very difficult to reach that point if you're doing the proper rest. All right. So what other questions do we have here? I thought maybe more of the high school students would pop in, but I remember that from last year, I was expecting that again last year, and I don't know, they don't want to ask questions. And I remember actually saying this last year. It seems to me like the high school students today. Yeah, you're welcome, Cardo. It seems to me that the high school students today, without trying to sound like I'm criticizing, I'm just characterizing, not criticizing. The high school students today have a tendency to think that they know stuff. I don't think this is just a personality thing. There is a personality aspect to it. But all the way through my trumpet career, even today, really, I'm constantly looking online, questioning stuff and looking for answers. But when it comes to the trumpet stuff, it was more true when I was younger because I knew lists and I was hungry for information about trumpet, about music, about jazz improvisation. I was starving for all that. I couldn't get enough ever. And like I said, it might be personality stuff because I'm still that way today. I surprised one of my adult students when I told him I had a whole playlist of trumpet master classes. Well, I watch all that. I watch those things. I don't, you don't have to agree with somebody to learn from them. And there's a lot of these master classes where they say stuff that I've worked my way through all that stuff, and yes, there's a bunch of that I don't agree with, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to watch it. That doesn't mean I have nothing to learn because every master class is going to cover a number of issues, and just because you disagree about one thing doesn't mean the whole thing is worthless. But yes, the whole time in my whole career, I've always been hungry for answers, hungry for more information. And it disturbs me how much that's lacking in the high school kids today. And I haven't quite put my finger on it. Is it that they don't want to know? Or is it more like what I said earlier, that they think they already know? There was an experience I had recently. Another disturbing experience. It was young students, right? And I'm fine with being disrespected because I don't demand people's respect, right? I hope that makes sense. I'm not self-deprecating or anything like that. It's just that if someone doesn't express gratitude or respect or something like that, I'm not gonna command it or demand it. I enjoy when those things are there, but anyway, so what I don't understand is if the tables were turned and I was sitting next to somebody who was doing for a living and has been doing for a living for 3 decades what I'm only now studying in school, I would want to know what that guy has to say. I would, first of all, I'd have my mouth shut. Right? This reminds me of when I first got to Houston and I started playing with Dennis Dotson and Buddy Cisco and those guys. I played in big bands with those guys for 20 years, I guess, before the big band thing started to go away. What an experience. And what did I do? Did I feel like I had to project onto them my opinion about stuff? If I had done that, I wouldn't be the player I am today. Does that make sense? If I had done back then what the students do today, I would have never learned what I know today that makes me a valuable player. And what is it? How would I summarize that difference? Keep my mouth shut. Nobody needs to know what I think. Keep my mouth shut and listen to what those guys have to say. so Buddy Cisco and Dennis Dotson were, so Dennis is famous for being in the Woody Herman band. He was a professional player in New York. He was a professional player in Las Vegas. He knows his stuff. He's obviously the most established jazz trumpet player here in Houston, and was already when I first got here. And Buddy Cisco was a lead trumpet player who had come up from the big band tradition, had toured with great big bands before he settled down in Houston. I forget which bands he was with, but he was with a number of those old bands. You don't blab your mouth off in front of those people when that's what you're trying to learn, right? You don't blab your mouth off trying to establish who you are when what you're trying to learn in life, the career you're trying to learn, is already being done by the guy sitting next to you. That's the time to turn your mouth off and open your ears and listen. Not just listen to what they have to say, but also listen to how they do it. So what am I talking about? Obviously, part of what I'm talking about is this convention that we went to. And it's just amazing to me that someone who's just getting started can think that they, not even talking about comparing them to me. I don't know. You know what? I better probably just stop talking about that. Anyway, do anybody else have any questions? Sorry about that. So we did have a successful trip to San Antonio for the ITG convention. I still have to, we chose a winner. Well, not chose, but the pulling out of the jar, so to speak. And have to do all those emails tonight. Anyway, it looks like this Q and A has lost its oomph. What else can I tell you guys about while we wait for maybe some people to show up? Maybe. So let me tell you about this. I don't normally have panic attacks. And maybe what I had wasn't technically a panic attack, but I was thinking, I had a student right before this, and I pulled out this book to show him what I've been doing, because he's, it's 4th of July is coming up. He's got a concert, and I told him that I bought a book of march scores so that I could study, because I wrote a march and I want to write it out for band. And when I said that out loud, I started to panic, because there's so much I want to do, and it looks like it's going to take forever to get any of this stuff done. And I've got so much on my plate right now. And yeah, that's and this Q and A is part of that. I want to do a better job on the Q and A. That's why we stopped doing it weekly. But starting to wonder if doing it weekly isn't better, and then just do a worse job at it. And what do I mean by worse job? So I don't know if you've noticed the old Q and A's. The old Q and A's now you can click a link and it'll take you to the answer to people's questions. Now that takes me about an hour to do that. So we do an hour on the Q and A, then we have an hour of editing all that stuff so I can get the timestamps is what they call it, timestamps. And then I have maybe another hour that I put into updating the website with answers, which I didn't do last time. And I'm just wondering at this point if it wouldn't be better just to not do that and just have weekly Q and A's again, so that people would know when to come in and actually participate. Because now it looks like nobody knows about it anymore. So, yeah, so I might drop all those other chores and just do the Q and A by itself, right? But so talking about the panic stuff, I want to do that. But, if I sat down and made a list of all the stuff I want to do, it would actually be kind of depressing, because I don't think it's humanly possible to get all that stuff done. I mean, writing a march for band, that's not so bad, because a lot of it's going to be copy and paste, right? I already wrote it out for a brass quintet. And a lot of that can also be applied to, hello, Cardo. Oh, so Cardo says, I guess weekly will be better. That's my humble opinion. Yeah, I think weekly would be better without all the bells and whistles. I might do that. So anyway, so yes, writing a march is not all that hard, but when is it going to get done with the time that I've got? I've got pieces lined up for publishing. My writing is now way, way ahead of my publishing. I've got a huge backlog of about 30 or 40 pieces that need to be published that I've finished writing already. Maybe that's part of what's contributing to this panic. Like I said, maybe it's not really a panic attack. It's just I sat here and I'm like, oh. There's a gig I have on the 1st, and I wanted to sing on the gig, and I need to work through the PA and getting used to singing with the PA. And I thought, wow, that's another thing to get done in the next 3 weeks. And yeah, it's a lot. Anyway, hello, Javier. Javier says, hello, nice to see you. I hope everything went okay with the Trumpet Q. Yes, it did. Went very well. Thank you. Oh, and I wanted to apologize actually about the last Q&A that we did, not the one that I did at ITG, but before that. When I was editing it, I'm like, what happened to this guy? It was so slow, and it was like I was half asleep or something. So anyway, Javier says, is there any problem with doing the routine after the music? So here's when it would be a problem, is if you went 5 days or so without practicing, and then you did the music first and then the routine, that might be a problem. And the only problem that we're talking about is that you might not gain all of the benefits that are available for doing the routine. Other than that, if you are practicing on a semi-regular basis, then it really doesn't matter what's first. The only reason I do the routine first is because it does have some warm-up properties to it. So it does help you get, going. But it's true, sometimes I start with the music too. So yeah, you can do the music first. Just make sure that you do some sort of warm-up before you practice the music. It can even be, for that matter, a mental warm-up too. What else? Javier says, I'm doing the pro schedule and the Pioneer is very easy, almost like a short warm-up. That's correct. You can do the Pioneer one as a warm-up. I've done that many times. All right. You know, one thing that's become more and more clear to me with the current batch of students that I've got is how much focus how important focus is. I think a lot of people see what I'm seeing and call it something else. And, when we talk about certain things or certain ways, it has different meanings to different people. I might be saying the same thing that other people say. Or like when they say you should relax, I don't think relaxing helps anything. They say you should concentrate. You should be, uh, what's that word? Be mindful and stuff like that. I think all of those words miss the mark. If we can go on the assumption that what I'm observing is what other people who say these things are observing when they say that stuff, I think the words they use are missing the mark. I prefer the word focus because focus will help you if you are focused. The thoughts that are not supposed to happen, remember that the relaxing thing, maybe, did I ever do a video on this? I don't know if I ever made a video about this. This used to be one of the most popular essays on my website where I talk about body tension. And body tension comes from opposing muscle groups. So if I try to lift my hand up and pull it down at the same time, I have both muscles on both sides of my arm are being tensed. That's body tension. And I believe that when we have contradicting thoughts, those contradicting thoughts create contradicting muscle groups. So like when you throw a ball, you have to have your eye on the target. Focus, right? That's the word we're talking about now. Focus on the target. You throw your ball to the target, and that automatically relaxes all the muscles that should not get in the way and tenses all the muscles that should be tensed. That's automatic. And that relaxation that they keep talking about is an automatic byproduct of focus. And the problem with the students that I've been seeing lately is that they don't have that focus. There's this constant, what do you call it? Constant self-criticism, and it's like a distraction, but a distraction. What's that? Metacognition. Have you guys ever heard of metacognition? That's thinking about what you're thinking. So people are playing, but instead of thinking about the music, they're thinking about them playing the music. and casting judgment on what's coming out of the horn. And it creates some bizarre things happening in their music. The trick to being a successful performer is to have that focus so that what you're thinking is in alignment with what you're playing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be thinking about the music. That's not necessarily what I'm meaning, because it is possible to have the music be so automatic that you're not thinking about the notes, the rhythms, all that stuff, and it comes out perfectly anyway. So why am I talking about focus? We're talking about warm up. If you warm up properly, it should help you achieve that focus. How do you know if you're focused or not? There are certain things I've been observing lately. You know what? It's almost like if you look at somebody in the eye, and so I can see the camera here, right? Okay. So I'm gonna pretend that I'm somebody that doesn't have that focus. So check this out. You'll see their eye, right? They're distracted over here, over there, instead of actually getting the job done. Does that make sense? And why do I say focus and put my hands like that? Is they used to have on the horses that would draw carts, whatever you call them, buggies or whatever, in the downtown city areas. They would put these blinders on so that they couldn't see over here or see over there. We need to be like that mentally. We're not going to think about things like politics, family problems, anything, nothing really. And what's included in those thoughts that we should not be thinking is how, like those negative condemnation, like, oh, you're such a terrible player, saying that to yourself. You shouldn't say stuff like that to yourself. Cardo says, Eddie, could you talk a bit about different acoustic situations? I've noticed how different it is to play the trumpet in different places, and acoustics, sometimes a dry room makes it so difficult. So, yes, basically what we're talking about there is reverb. Well, not reverb. Now, reverb is part of it. What's it called? Resonance. You know that my understanding of resonance on the trumpet started where everybody else's starts, right? We learned that resonance is something that happens from the lips to the bell, and it has to do with the standing wave. And that's how the trumpet works. And we start there. And then as you grow in maturity, understanding how the trumpet works, you learn that it doesn't actually start there. It starts here. Your entire body resonates with the trumpet. And then after that, you learn that it's not just there either. It doesn't just start there. Now we add to that the resonance of the room. Those three things cannot be separated from each other. They call it the player system. You have the horn. On the this side of the horn, you have your air column cavity that resonates. I believe that it's not just the air column. I think you also have all of your organs probably resonate as well when you play the trumpet. So that's why different people sound different ways, is they're going to have different resonances. Then when you play in the room, a dead room does not give you any feedback. Not here, and not in the sense of a standing wave. I know that's not the same thing. I'm not suggesting that there's a standing wave in outside the bill. I'm not saying that, but there, I'm not convinced that there's no feedback at all physically. And here's what happens if you don't have that feedback. Then you have to try harder to get the sound that you're looking for. And that's why it can destroy you chop-wise. That's why it can destroy you chop-wise, because you're trying so hard to get that sound that you just love. I'm kind of blessed in this room because I've got 6-foot windows. I've got 3 of them, and then some bare walls. So I do have a fair amount of resonance in this room. I hope that makes sense. So, but that's what it is if you have a dead room, it's because of the dampening of the carpet, the dampening of the curtains, the dampening of the furniture. And those things do make it more difficult because you're not getting feedback. You know what it's very similar to? It's very similar to playing in a band that everybody else is mic'd and you're not. It's the same phenomenon. If you're not getting any reverb back from the room, any feedback back from the room, it forces you to play differently. Now, interestingly, we have to play that way in the studio because they can't. So that's why they put carpet on the walls, and if it's not carpet, they'll put those sound blocks, the things that dampen sound, on the wall. They'll have, if there is a window, the window will be tilted so that when it reflects up into these dampenings. They don't make just a flat window. If they do, they have to find some way to keep that bounce from going back to the microphones. So lots of carpeting and stuff like that. And so that's the kind of deadness that a lot of people can't play in. They find it very difficult to play in that. So that's why we have to have the headphones. They put fake resonance in the, canned, they call it canned I said vibrato the last time. What's the word? Reverb. Canned reverb. But yes, that's the thing. And one thing that we have to do with the dead rooms is get used to playing in that way. We want to put ourselves in that situation so that we can handle it when it comes up, because sometimes it comes up and you have to get used to it. Sort of like the practice rooms, right? The old-fashioned style practice rooms. They were designed to be dead. Javier says, yes, it happens very often, metacognition in various aspects of my life. It goes away when I just play improvising. Yes, that's nice. That's good. When I play with no rules, I don't think, and it sounds better. That's good. Hello, Raimo. I got your email. That's some wonderful, wonderful playing. I'll answer your email. I've just been very busy lately. Oh, you're back. Raimo says, I'm back with new teeth. Congratulations. I'm glad to hear that. Raimo asks, room, what is the minimum size of room? I am training in a very small room full of horns. That's fine. A lot of people only have the size of my desk to practice in. So there's nothing wrong with practicing in a small, confined place. You know, when I was in college, that's all we had. And what we would do every once in a while is if there was no concert or rehearsal on the recital hall and they left it open, we would go and practice in the recital hall, or we would go practice in the band room. Now that was a different time. You would be hard pressed to find something like that that's not locked up afterwards in today's society, for as bad as things have gotten. But back when I was in college, everything was still left open almost all the time because nobody was stealing stuff all the time. Javier says, hello, Raimo. I hope the tooth fairy gave you some cash. Raimo says, no cash, but thanks to our healthcare, I did not have to pay anything. Well, that's good. And about the room, but sound requires some space. That's true. Now, what we used to do when we were practicing in the practice rooms was put something that will reflect the sound. So, like I have this tile over here. This is not the best example because it's not a smooth surface, but you can put something like this on your stand and play into it and get the sound to come back to your ears directly. There's also, well, let me show you. So if I'm practicing in a very tight room, I'm going to do something like this. And that way you get at least a true representation of what's actually coming out of your bill. Okay? Okay, yes, playing against the window is also the same way. Javier says the daily routine has different levels, but what would you recommend in regards of volume? How often should you go balls to the wall? In the routine, don't do that. As long as you're following my system, you shouldn't actually do that. This is part of the reason why we do the 50% rule, is because that's going to happen on the music side, not the routine side. The routine should be mezzo forte throughout. Oh, excuse me. Let me say that again since I burped. The routine should be mezzo forte throughout. I did not put dynamics in the routine for a reason. That's not where we work on dynamics. We want the same dynamic all the way through everything. Then, remember, music is supposed to be more than half. When you practice the music, and this involves also your improvisation. So when you're doing your improvisation, if you're not doing dynamics, then maybe it's time to start adding that, right? So Now I know that the microphone and the technology, it doesn't pick up the dynamics as well, but what I just did now is I started very soft, built up and made it loud, and then came back down soft again. And your music practice should have that in it all the time. And by the way, since I'm talking about that, I do not agree with the people who say, learn the notes and rhythms first and then add the music. No, I've been against that since the 80s. I have been against that practice since the 80s. No, you do not learn the notes and music first and then add the notes and rhythms first and then add the music. You do not do that. You learn the music first. Being musical is paramount. In the truest sense of the word, being musical is paramount. It is what comes first, it's what comes last. It's what it is always. Okay? There is, and part of the reason why I developed this attitude about that is because with so many of these students that say, oh, I'm learning the notes and rhythms first and then I'll add the music, they never add the music. It doesn't happen. And part of the reason for that, in my estimation, part of the reason for that is because how do you know when you've learned the notes and rhythms well enough to move on? How do you know? At what point do you say, oh yeah, I'm good enough now at the notes and rhythms, it's time to add the music? At what point does that happen? Is it when you can kind of almost already play it? Is it when you can play it without any mistakes? How good does it have to be before you start adding the expression stuff to it? It doesn't work. So I am of the opinion that you start off being musical at all times. If you can't play the notes and be musical at the same time, you're going too fast. I'm going to say that again. If you can't play the notes and be musical at the same time, you are going too fast. You must be musical at all times. Now, that's not true for the routine. I hope that makes sense. Hello, Jeffrey. It's not true for the routine. We're not supposed to be musical on the routine. But once again, that's why we're doing the 50% rule. At least half of your time should be spent exploring style, dynamics, phrasing, all of that stuff. All of the stuff that comes together to make it sound musical, to make it expressive. That's when you work on the dynamics. And so how often should you go balls to the wall in that context? As often as it comes up in the music. So if you were a classical guy, we have that the Hindemith. Right? We want to play that loud. And here's how I approach this. In practice, we want to over-exaggerate the dynamics. We want to over-exaggerate the expression. We want to, if it's supposed to have vibrato, we want to put a nice fat vibrato on it. That way, when we go to the performance, we can can ease that off a little bit. Okay? So when it comes up in the music, then you want to push that. If it's, what about the other end of it? What about playing pianissimo? Like the Tchaikovsky, I think it's Tchaikovsky 4. And I don't remember the exact notes. I might be in the wrong key. I haven't looked at that in many, many years. Yeah, we want to emphasize how soft that is. That's when you work on your dynamics, is in the context of the music. A lot of people disagree with me on that. That's all right. Hello, Jess Ford. Do you prefer lip vibrato or hand vibrato? I do both. And for me, it's not lip vibrato. It's jaw vibrato. I'll tell the students to chew on the note. So that for me, the jaw actually goes up and down. So I use hand vibrato for jazz and jaw vibrato for classical. And the only reason I do that is so I can separate the two in my head. Okay? I don't know what made me do this, but that's how I just, one day in the 90s, I woke up and realized that's how I do it. So if, and there's two pieces I use to demonstrate that. I use Misty to demonstrate the jazz vibrato. I just did it with my lips. Ha! That's funny. Anyway, so I use that to demonstrate the jazz vibrato, and then I think this is Berlioz. I can't remember now. Anyway. Oh, I played the wrong note. Anyway, so yes, I use jaw vibrato for classical, and I use hand vibrato for jazz. Notice that how different the jazz vibrato is from the classical vibrato. Classical vibrato tends to be more narrow, not narrow, shallow, a more shallow vibrato, but it's also a faster vibrato. And also the difference is that the classical vibrato tends to be metered. What I mean by metered is that the wah 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 is the same speed throughout. Right? Jazz doesn't do that. If you play it like that on jazz, we want to have unmetered, much less shallow, much deeper vibrato, and yeah. Okay. Now, could I do the reverse of that? Could I do hand vibrato for the Berlioz? I would have to practice it. That's a little bit too deep, I think. But yes, I could do it. And I think it's a little easier to do jazz vibrato on the jaw. Boy, that's hard. Switching it because I've been doing it the other way for so long. 11. All right. I hope that answers the question. Javier says, why is it easier to hit high notes with a mouthpiece or a Newt that gives you more back pressure? Yeah, you used the right word. That's correct. Why is it easier? I used to have an answer for that. Now, why is it not coming up? My little database isn't churning an answer out right now. Okay, so yes, that's it. Remember how we get high notes and how we get low notes. We have to balance the air against the resistance. Air against resistance. You increase the resistance and the note goes up. So the back pressure that you're talking about can also be described as resistance. By adding the mute, you have greater resistance and therefore the notes are going to come out higher. Not okay, that's not what I mean. It'll be easier to get the notes that higher. I hope that makes sense. So I think it's because of the added resistance, which, and you're right, it is back pressure. All resistance is back pressure. Oh, Ramos says, please show the hand movement. I didn't see any. Okay. I'll try to do it from the side so you can see it. I'm trying to over-exaggerate so you can see. Now, on classical stuff, it's going to be very, very subtle. So let's do one of the conconis. When we're on an open note, it's the thumb on the lead pipe that moves the horn. Now, I don't, like I said, I don't know, normally in classical music, I don't normally use hand vibrato. I'm just showing you because I know, Raimo, that you are a classical playing more on the classical side than on the jazz side. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So if I were to play that same one the way I would normally play it, it would be from the jaw. Ah. Anyway, I hope that helped. Good, Raimo. You're welcome. I hope that helped. Kato says, why sometimes I just get some air balls and no sound? It happens mostly when I play softly or when I'm tired. Okay, that's when the lips stop vibrating. Okay, and this, I know this sounds like a lot of people would just say this is a cop out. I've been exploring these things for so long now. I'm so convinced that all of this is an issue of familiarity. If you want to do well playing softly, if you want to do playing fatigued, you have to spend time doing those things. So yes, the air balls happen. My system, what I'm talking about does not work if you're not like okay with it. You're not supposed to be okay with it. I think sometimes my teaching didn't work early on because the students thought that's what I was saying. I never said it's okay, right? I think what they think is that if you continue, then it's okay. But you have to continue if you want that familiarity. So let's look at the playing softly thing. For the air balls to go away, you have to spend more time playing softly. But when you play softly, there's air balls. So you have to play through the air balls. You have to have in your head this idea that that's not acceptable. And I know that we already said that we're not going to judge ourselves like that. And I'm not suggesting that that's what we're thinking while we're playing. Okay, I'm not saying that while we're playing that you beat yourself up for having air balls. That's not what I'm saying. But you know that's the moment it happens, you know it's not right, and you have to have that. It's not okay for the air balls to happen, but you have to keep doing it so that your mind can figure that stuff out. It's a subconscious thing. And the same thing is equally true for the endurance thing, right? When you get at the end of your endurance, the lips get tough, they get swollen, the the tissue can get too hard, depending on what's what's going on with your face, and yes, it can be the exact same thing. The airs. If you want to get your tired chops to not have air balls, you have to play louder. So really, we're talking about the same thing. It really is the same thing. And the only way you can make that stop is to continue to play in both of those scenarios. And I'll tell you what will kill the progress is if when you have air bombs, you stop. Do not stop. Keep going, doing what you were doing. Keep going. So if you're doing air bombs, right? Let's say and also you're going to have more air bombs on the lower notes, usually. So let's say, look, I just heard Wagner in my head. And I don't remember the key. Let's say you're doing something like that and one of those notes doesn't come out. I just had to fake a couple of air bombs, right? Let's say that happens. You have to keep going. Don't do this. Don't keep stopping every time you have air bombs. Play through the phrase. When you play through the phrase, you're going to encourage this familiarity that I keep talking about. So going back to that melody. Now, this melody is supposed to be like triple forte. I'm playing it as an example of something soft. That's kind of ironic. You see what I'm doing? I'm continuing even though those notes aren't coming out. Now I had to fake that. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the main thing that you want to do with the air bombs is follow through. I call this, what I'm talking about now, with my students, I call it commit to the follow through. And I just told a student this today. In every type of practice technique, there's always a predefined starting point and a predefined ending point. Always. There is no such thing as a practice technique that you just start playing and then you just stop arbitrarily. There's no such thing. All practice involves a start place and an end place. What the commitment to the follow through is that when you start, you don't stop till you get to the ending. It's actually more difficult than it sounds. I've been teaching this for years, and still sometimes I'll be demonstrating to a student how you're supposed to play something, and I'll stop and go back. So it is a terribly, terribly bad habit to stop and fix stuff. What we want to do and for the sake of familiarity, what we want to do is start where we're supposed to start and not stop until we get to the end. So let's say, for example, on that same melody, I'll go to the loud volume now. Not as loud as it should be. I think that's in the wrong key. That's what we don't want to do. That's not follow through. Okay? You see what I'm doing? I'm faking mistakes, and I'm thinking going back and fixing the mistakes on an execution. That is a terrible, terrible, terrible way to practice. We want to follow through. You know where you're going to stop. You know where you're going to end, no matter how many mistakes you make. No matter how bad it sounds. You start, you end. If there was something worth stopping to fix, finish it. Now go back and fix it. You don't just stop midstream. Okay? All right. Ramos says, I have also used knee and body parts. That makes sense. Like the sax players, right? They'll play into their leg to get a low A, huh? Javier says, you are right, Ramo. Tight mouthpieces with shallower cups. And oh, I see. You guys are, yeah, okay. Okay, cool. Any other questions? I see we're 15 minutes over. That's all right. Let's get a couple more questions in because we got kind of off to a slow start. I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about with the follow-through stuff. Okay. That's one of the worst practice habits that I encounter as a teacher. And it's been since I started teaching. I remember one student I had, she was working on a solo. I asked her to bring a cassette player because I didn't have one. And she was playing for her solo for me, and she was doing that. So it's like trying to do Mary Had a Little Lamb. Right? There's what you're playing now becomes completely unrecognizable. It doesn't sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I do believe actually that there's mental consequences. You know, imagine as a parent, and you have to listen to your child practicing like that. Play this mental game with me, right? Let's say you're doing work in this room, and the child, and I know this because my son used to practice right in this room, in this building, in this house, in the next room over, used to practice when I'm trying to get work done here. It's torture. I'm not saying that he was that bad. I'm just saying it can all just hearing someone practice when you're trying to work can be really, really torturous, right? Now add to that this start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. So that it doesn't even sound like the song you're trying to play. I think it has a, you know, they say that music has the power to soothe the savage beast or something like that. I forget the exact saying. But bad music has the opposite effect. And here's the thing is I think that when we're playing, we're not aware of what it's doing to our subconscious. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the other person you're doing this to. It can actually be you who you're having this effect on. So if you play something like that, where you're stopping in the middle of something and fixing it and moving on, and creating this gibberish sounding piece of music, if you're doing that, you're creating a mental turmoil inside your own head. And when you sit down after that practice session, you're going to be razzled. Whereas you could be, if you were practicing properly with the follow-through, you can sit down after your practice and relax because that practice session could soothe your spirit. But if you don't do this follow-through thing and you stop and fix stuff, then you can be causing a terrible degree of unrest and angst inside your mind. It can actually stress you out more than anything you can imagine. Javier says, yeah, it's very hard mentally to do the follow-through. Yes, it is hard. About the follow-through, now I say to myself, it's supposed to go wrong. I am a evolved monkey trying to make music with my lips over the piece of metal. It works so I can relax and don't get frustrated. Man, I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be perfect for you to get that result of calm. It doesn't have to be perfect. Once you have this focus that we were talking about earlier, and you start and you finish, and if you're going to repeat it 10 times, you sing and finger in the middle, you start, you finish, finger it, start, you finish, finger it. That will calm you down. Now practice is no longer frantic. It's no longer panicked. I have some students that tell me, well, I don't feel panicked. You know what I think sometimes is when they say that? They don't realize they've been panicked all along because of this fixing it in the middle thing. Now, I'm not saying everyone who says that is guilty of that. I'm not saying that. But if you do, it's all a matter of context, right? If you do it all the time, it's not going to feel like you're doing it because you do it all the time. You don't realize how panicked you are until you stop panicking. So anyway, let's take one more question and then we will go. I think we will go back to weekly again. I apologize for being wishy-washy on that. I think I will drop the extra chores so that we can actually have a weekly Q and A. I really wanted to do, make it better than just having the Q and A, but it doesn't seem like that's going to work out the way I wanted it to work out. I thought doing it better would mean more people would be interested, and it doesn't look like that's how it's going to be. Javier says, thanks for doing the Q&A, Eddie, and sharing your trumpet wisdom. Looking forward to having my first class with you. Woohoo! Yeah. Take care, trumpet fans. Yeah, we'll see you. I'm looking forward to that too. All right, guys. Well, yeah, we'll do it weekly again. Look, I have a story that because this is, for lack of a better way of putting it, this is a business decision, right? About the Q&A, and it reminds me of you're welcome, Cardo. It reminds me of a story from my publishing past. I thought that if the quality of the paper and everything about my publishing was better, that people would want my product. But the problem is, and I had to learn this the hard way, if people don't care about the quality, then you've wasted all your time and effort and money. So I have still stuff sitting around the house today, stuff that we printed when we were still selling physical sheet music. That's such very high quality. And it's still sitting here today. It's like 15 years old. And I'll tell you how high the quality is. It hasn't bleached. It's 15 years old. It hasn't bleached. This is high quality paper, high quality print. It's part of what we were giving away in our gift packs at ITG. And yes, very high quality stuff, but people don't want high quality. People want what's instant and what helps them now. So yeah, that was a bad decision. I think the Q and A thing falls in that same category. I wanted to do a better job, but if the better job isn't making things better, then why would I do that anyway? So yes, all right. So great. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I do think we'll go back to weekly again, and with the exception of when I have gigs, of course. And other than that, God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time. All right. Have a great week. Goodbye.